Well, welcome to this presentation in which we're going to discuss how to obtain a textbook for a college course. It may be a little bit late. You may think to yourself, I've already purchased the textbook, but this information, if you don't already have it, may be helpful for your next semester. Or perhaps there's a few of y'all that haven't actually made a final decision about your textbook. Couple of things to start with. In my classes, a textbook, if it is required, it really is required. You do need to purchase it. Or let me put it this way, you need to have access to it. But there's lots of different ways of having access to a textbook, and many ways can be dramatically cheaper than buying a brand new version of the textbook. So the first thing you need to know is, what textbook do I need to buy? There's two places to get that information. The first is the syllabus, but you won't have the access to the syllabus typically until the first day of the semester, and many times students want to buy the book before then. Perfectly understandable. So let me show you where you go to find out information about the textbook before the semester starts. And there's really two methods, but they're both through collin.edu. So let me show you both of those methods. So I'm going to go to our home page. So one way would be to go to academics. We go over here to schedule, and to go into our schedule for this particular class. I'm just going to pick a class here. I'm going to go into the right semester. I'm just going to pick one class, but it could be any one of these classes. And once I click on this, I can go to the bookstore links. Oh, wait a second. For some reason, they don't list it here. Well, okay, so when this happens, this doesn't mean that there isn't a bookstore book list if for some reason the system just failed to connect with the book. So let's go the other way. So this is, in a way, a good example. Most of the time, your book information is going to be populated right here, but every now and again, the system will have a glitch. So let's go to collin.edu, and this time we're going to go to academics again, and we're going to go to the bookstore. And we're going to go to textbooks. We're going to go to find textbooks, and we're going to pick a campus. This is an online course, so you could actually pick any campus. I'm just going to pick my own campus, and I'm going to go into summer courses. I'm going to type in BUSI, and the course is 2301, and the section is this one, and I'm going to find that information. And here is the course information. You can see it's exactly the same course. For whatever reason, the information didn't translate or transfer over. So here we have several different options that the campus bookstore is going to provide. You can rent it only, you can buy it digitally, you can rent it digitally. Many times you also have the option of buying a paper version. I'm not sure whether or not listing one here. So if you want to buy a paper version, it doesn't look like they're going to have it available for you here. But as you can see, there's a lot of variety in the prices. So this would be the information about the textbook. Another place to go for information about the textbook is the syllabus. You're not going to have access to the syllabus until the semester starts when you get onto Canvas. But you'll see, at least on my syllabi, typically it's going to be the second or third page. And you go, there's kind of some, the first page is full of stuff we have to say. And then the second page, I usually include a lot of Canvas information. It's really the third page that there's kind of information that's maybe relevant to your everyday lives. And you can see it'll be under the textbook section, and I will list the author and the name of the book. And so you can then use that information to find the particular version of the book that you want. So those are essentially 3 methods. And again, if you try both of the first 2 methods early in the semester and you can't figure out where it is, then you're welcome to email me, and I'll be glad to let you know what the textbook information is. So let's consider the options that we have. One option is to buy a new book, one that hasn't been used before. The positives about that is that it's definitely going to be the right edition, and it's going to be a clean copy that doesn't have any writing, that has a good spine, but you're going to pay for it. I could see that being a good choice if it is a book that you are going to be using for multiple semesters, or that you anticipate that you're going to use in the long haul. Maybe it's a resource that you want to use professionally for years to come. Then it may make sense to buy a new version of the book. Most people don't need to buy a new version of the book, so let's talk about other options. Well, one is to rent. When you rent, you're going to be renting the current edition, so it'll be new in some sense, even if somebody owned it before, but it's new in the sense that it's the right edition. You can rent a paper version of the book, or you can rent an electronic version of the book. Now, this option can be very sensible, but if you like to mark up your books, obviously an electronic version doesn't really give you that option of marking it up. The paper version, you do have the option of marking it up, but you're not going to get your full money back under those circumstances. And so if you are a heavy user of highlighters or things like that, this may not be the best option. Let me go back to the first option and talk a little bit about buy new. There's actually several different options under this category. One buy new option is to buy a hardcover version of a book. Some textbooks come in hardcover. That same edition may come in a soft covered book, and it may also come in a loose leaf type of book. Typically, the loose leaf is not going to be very durable, but it will be significantly cheaper. And so you may want to consider, how do I plan on using this book? How rough am I going to be on it? How long do I want it after the fact? Those are decisions that don't have anything to do with the content of the book. The content will be the same either way. Okay, so in terms of renting, again, the paper version is nice in that you can hold it in your hands. You can use it even when you don't have Wi-Fi access. And you can, put Post-its in it or things like that. Some people prefer the paper to the electronic. But the electronic is also handy too, in that, paper books weigh. They're not necessarily the most transportable. If you have an electronic version, you can probably access it pretty much wherever you are, assuming you have access to Wi-Fi. So there's advantages to both approaches. A very popular choice historically has been buying used books, and you can buy a used book that is of your current edition, or you can buy a used book that is of an earlier edition. Obviously, if it's the current edition, there's really no downside to buying used, except, you may have to deal with a little bit of stray marks and with a book that isn't quite as pretty, but you can have pretty significant savings. Now, publishers don't get a piece of the current edition used book market. They've already sold the book once. They're not getting any cut on this second and third selling. So obviously they see that as not the most positive thing for them. So textbook publishers typically like to publish new editions pretty quickly so that they can persuade people to go ahead and buy a new book, because students oftentimes are interested in buying a used book, but they want to buy the same edition. Well, if a new edition has just come out, there won't be an option of a used book. And so if you can find a used version of your book that is the current edition, that makes a lot of sense in many cases. The issue then becomes, well, let's say I can't buy a used version of the book that is the current edition. Should I risk it? Should I buy an earlier edition? This really varies from discipline to discipline. In the courses that I teach, I would say almost always earlier editions are going to be okay. That doesn't mean you can go back 20 years, but you can go back certainly one edition almost always. But buying an earlier edition is going to save you a significant amount of money, but it also means that you're going to have to work a little bit harder. There's a few things to keep in mind. One is you're going to have to realize that page numbers that I give are probably going to be wrong. They'll probably be in the neighborhood, because typically the author is not going to make dramatic changes to the book. But you may find that chapters are paginated. Maybe one chapter is broken into 2 sections or an additional content is added. And so you may find that the chapter numbers are different. And you may find that there is some content missing. And so in that situation, you are likely to need to reach out to me, the instructor, maybe come to my office hours and borrow the current edition of the book. I'm happy for you to borrow the current edition of the book, but I don't always have it in my office, so you'll have to let me know ahead of time that you're interested in borrowing it. And I usually just allow students to borrow it, for one day or so. That way I can kind of keep track of it. But that is certainly an option. If you aren't willing to do those tasks, an earlier edition of the book is not a good choice for you. I don't vet earlier editions of books. I mean, there are some times that I can tell you definitively, yeah, that'll be fine. But I'm not an expert always in the earlier edition, so you're kind of taking a risk. But can be a significant amount of savings. Some strategies to think about in terms of deciding whether to go with an earlier edition or not, we'll talk about in just a few minutes. So I'm going to flag this as something we're going to return to. Another option, which students don't do very often, but I encourage you to consider it, is sharing a book. I do not have open book tests, so there's no reason in the world why you can't share a book with 1 or 2 or more students for that matter. It does require a little bit of discipline in terms of scheduling time. Obviously, everyone can't have it on Sunday night, and so you have to be sure that that is being planned and that the person that you're sharing with is reliable. They're not going to lose the book. They're going to be available to let you have the book when you need it. But that can be a good option. And if you have an interest in posting something in the classroom about seeking somebody who wants to share a book, I'll be glad to facilitate that, so let me know. Let's talk about places you can obtain the book. The Collin Bookstore is actually run by Barnes & Noble, and that can be a really good resource for getting books. Certainly it's very, very convenient. You can go to it on any one of the 3 major campuses. They will have the books in stock, ready to go almost always. It's a special, and another benefit is that they will price match. Now, you want to check the specifics of the price match policy. It does not necessarily price match for used books or things along those lines. So just because they have a price match policy doesn't necessarily mean that they are always going to be the best deal in town. But they do have a policy that you'd want to check out to see exactly how it works. And you can't, of course, argue with their convenience. They're especially convenient for students with financial aid in that they will process that themselves. You can go to some of these other resources as a financial aid student, but you're likely to have to pay for the book and then get reimbursement. You may not have the funds to buy the book right now, and so that can become difficult for you. So that's something to consider. So the Collin bookstores are a smart choice. Another smart choice is Amazon. Amazon has lots of choices. You just go to Amazon.com and type in the name of the book. I happen to have pulled up the same book that we have here. I just typed that in and came up with the book here, and I can click on this and I can rent it. You can see that the price for renting is actually lower than the price we saw on the Collin website. So that's something to consider. The Collin may be willing to match that price though. You can get a hardcover version. You can get a paperback version. You can get a loose leaf version. You can buy an older version in various and sundry formats. And so there's lots of options with Amazon. Again, not as convenient, maybe especially less convenient for students on financial aid. There won't be an immediate turnaround time. Amazon typically gives college students free 2-day shipping on textbooks with prime students, so something to consider in terms of that. Even if you don't decide that you're going to use Amazon, a thing that I encourage you to go to Amazon.com for, if you're considering an earlier version of the textbook, is to go to here and look at the current edition of the textbook. You can see the table of contents, and you can look up a few pages and just see, has it been significantly rewritten from your edition? Here, let me find the table of contents. And again, here they say what's new about the 4th edition. So if you are thinking about the 3rd edition, you literally can look here and see what the changes are, and think about whether that's going to impact, whether you actually do want the new edition of the book. So that's kind of a handy cheat sheet. And here are the various chapters. And you can see, are they numbered the same as the edition that you're going to look for? So that's a handy way of going about looking at this. Let's see if we can find an earlier edition of this. Let me just type in Kubiak Dynamic Business Law 3 edition. Let's see. Here we go, 3rd edition. So let's say you were thinking about 3rd edition. They are not going to let us have an electronic version of this, doesn't look like. So you won't be able to see the table of contents, it doesn't seem. But if you happen to be considering a 3rd edition and you happen to have it in your hands, and you can flip to it and see what that version might look like. Here's another option, online access for dynamic business law, the essentials. Again, you might want to consider this and see what exactly is in this book different. If it's missing just a single chapter, what you might want to do is come to my office hours and just take really complete notes about that one chapter. And so there's some options along those lines to consider. So Amazon is a really good resource, even if you don't end up buying it through Amazon. Half Price Books is another option. You can actually go to their physical locations. There's one in Frisco. I think there's more than one in Plano. And then there's at least one in McKinney. So I encourage you to go to the physical places, because sometimes you will find your textbooks. It's especially a good place for college resources that are more general. For example, a college level dictionary. Many times my paralegal courses, you will see the books like the Green Book and the Blue Book. If you're looking for a version of MLA or the APA or something like that, you're very likely to be able to find a very inexpensive version at Half Price Books. And occasionally you will find textbooks, but usually you're going to want to go to halfpricebooks.com, and it's actually the abbreviation of it, to find all of the cool things that we have. And again, I've gone to Half Price Books and I typed in our author, and you can see we have some resources here to consider. You can see it's only $20. Pretty remarkable. Here's another version of this. This is an earlier edition. You don't need Connect for my course. This is out of stock, so you can't do that. Obviously, the inventory of half price books is constantly turning and churning, and so you could go every day and look at this. That's true also for Amazon. But again, half price books oftentimes will get you your best price, even if they don't have all the bells and whistles. You can also go to the publisher's website. We can see here with Half Price Books. Actually, let me go to Amazon. Also Barnes & Noble. I'm also on the Barnes & Noble website. Same thing, I typed in Kubiak, and we can see their version of this. You can see the hard cover price. You can also see they again also have used versions of the book. And we can see here that McGraw-Hill is the publisher. So you could go to the McGraw-Hill website and find out if the publisher has a deal where you can rent the book. Sometimes they can give you better prices than middlemen. So again, something to consider as you are shopping around. And then finally, you can go to local bookstores in the area, places like PJ's, and there's others near campuses that sell or rent books. So those are just some resources to think about. So the big takeaway that I want to emphasize is with earlier editions, you can save dramatic money, but you need to shop smart. And so those are some things to consider as you go forward. I hope that this information is helpful. If it didn't help you this semester, I apologize for the fact that it's a little bit late, but maybe it'll help you for the next semester. Again, thanks for your attention, and I hope you have a wonderful day.